Tony, it's always great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Well, let me start with the real wars, or the potential real wars. I was in Israel earlier this week when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made his presentation on Iran's nuclear program, and he did it in English. Yep. That was very significant. Who do you think he was communicating to?
Well, I thought the presentation that the Prime Minister made this week was nothing short of extraordinary. I think he principally had an audience of one, and that was President Trump, that he was talking very directly to. But he was also talking to all of America. He was talking to all of our allies. And he was talking very directly to Iran as well. And the presentation that he laid out was unlike any speech any head of state has I think, given in history. It was remarkable in its power and its force. He was like a prosecutor laying a case out to the jury. And he was relaying, as you know, the results of an incredible intelligence operation where the Israeli intelligence, the Mossad, captured over 100,000 secret Iranian documents that demonstrate that Iran for over 20 years has been working actively trying to develop nuclear weapons, and that the representations they made, that all the promises the Obama-Iran deal was based on, were all a mountain of lies. And I think the Prime Minister, in fact, I would encourage your listeners to Google the speech and watch it yourself. It's that powerful. It's worth watching and listening and seeing the evidence yourself of original Iranian photographs and charts and memos and even videos of their scientists working to develop nuclear weapons, directly contrary to everything they said as part of the Obama-Iran nuclear deal.
I thought the presentation was riveting. And I know that you've been a critic of the deal that President Obama made. Does this presentation, coming at the time and with this timing, right before President Trump has renegotiation, nixes the deal, modifies the deal, I mean, I have to think that in large part, or at least in part, the Prime Minister was speaking to the American people and showing them the evidence that's out there.
I think that's exactly right. And the national security implications of the Obama deal now are number one, that we have allowed billions of dollars to flow to the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. And Iran is directly responsible for the murder of hundreds of U.S. servicemen and women. But number two, that those billions of dollars under the Iran deal, as Obama signed off on it, is scheduled to sunset in just a few years, after which that deal has no problems at all with the Ayatollah Khamenei possessing nuclear weapons. I think that is profoundly foolish and is the greatest national security threat facing America. It's also the greatest national security threat facing Israel. And I believe the path before President Trump is clear, that we should withdraw immediately from this deal. We should reimpose crushing sanctions. We should urge our allies to do the same. And we should make clear that under no circumstances will the Ayatollah, who regularly chants death to America and death to Israel, under no circumstances will he be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons.
Yeah, Senator Cruz, I think it's quite evident from the presentation that the Prime Minister made, something, I mean, we all really knew to be the case, but now we have the evidence that you can't trust anything that comes out of their mouths. They've lied the whole time.
Yep. Well, and one of the things that Prime Minister Netanyahu did so powerfully is he opened the presentation with videos of the Ayatollah Khamenei, of President Rouhani, of Foreign Minister Zarif, making commitments on video where they're saying, we have not sought a nuclear bomb, we do not seek nuclear weapons. Indeed, one of them said, it would be against our religion to seek nuclear weapons. It would be immoral, and we would never, ever do it. And then he immediately cuts to their own video of their scientists doing it at the explicit written directives of the people who are claiming they would never seek nuclear weapons to murder us with.
Quite eye-opening and not shocking, but very revealing. You're listening to Washington Watch. I'm your host, Tony Perkins. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, my guest. Let's talk trade wars. One of the things you've been working on in a unified effort with other members of the Senate and the administration is to take this take a stronger look at NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, something that's high on your list of priorities.
It is, and the reason is it impacts jobs, it impacts economic growth in Texas powerfully. The most consistent concern I hear from Texas business owners, from Texas farmers and ranchers, is concerns about what's going to happen on trade. And in my view, renegotiating NAFTA, it could be a good thing or a bad thing. It could be a good thing if we use this as an opportunity to expand our access to the Mexican markets, to the Canadian markets, to increase trade. That will benefit the country. It'll benefit Texas and it'll benefit the whole country. On the other hand, if this becomes a vehicle for erecting barriers to the U.S. market and for shutting down trade, I think that would be very, very harmful. And the challenge right now is there are widely divergent voices within the Trump administration. There are some voices that are pushing for the first path and some for the second. I can tell you, Tony, I have emphatically made the case to the president directly and to virtually every senior member of the administration that we should be expanding trade, not shutting it down, and that, in fact, the single greatest opportunity on NAFTA renegotiation is energy, opening up the Mexican energy markets where they have vast resources there. Doing that could produce thousands of high-paying jobs both in Mexico and the United States. It'd be a win-win for everybody.
Where do you think, Senator Cruz, where do you think the negotiations or the potential negotiations with China on trade are going to end up?
You know, China, I am more optimistic. One of the consistent patterns of the Obama administration for 8 years was that they were so weak in dealing with China that China just ran all over us. And the Obama administration did not vigorously or effectively advocate for American businesses, for American consumers, for American producers. That's an area where I think the Trump administration is doing far more, is leaning in much more vigorously. Is addressing things like the theft of American intellectual property, which is in China is in significant degrees a matter of state policy, and the intellectual property theft is massive. I'm encouraged that the Trump administration is using the economic and diplomatic tools we have to press back on that. Yet, you know, a couple of years ago, I sat down with the senior leadership of John Deere. And they described to me how incredibly difficult it is to sell a tractor in China, that China puts all these non-tariff barriers in place, specifying through regulatory means what a tractor has to have, and when an American company tries to design a tractor to meet them, they change them so that only the Chinese tractors suffice. That sort of gamesmanship is taking advantage of America, and I'm hopeful the Trump administration will make progress turning that around.
Yeah, hopefully they'll plow some new ground when it comes to trade with China.
Well said.
Let's talk. But before we run out of time, I want to go to the media wars.
Sure.
You are not unfamiliar at all with the hostility of the media. We've worked closely together on a number of things, including in the primary. Are you at all surprised with how the media has responded to President Trump? I mean, since day one.
You know, I'm not, but it is sad to watch. The media is on full scale meltdown. They are consumed by Trump derangement syndrome, where you can see them just foaming at the mouth. And there's an irony to it, because the media played a big part in his election to begin with by covering then candidate Donald Trump round the clock with $3 billion of free media, and now they hate him so much that they don't even pretend to be impartial. It's actually one of, I think, the real upsides of where we are, and I think there are many upsides of where we are, but one of them is that it really has unmasked the media for the partisan warriors that they are, and ironically, I think the media, unbeknownst to themselves, are some of the president's best friends, because they're so unfair, they're so filled with hate that anyone watching them says, well, gosh, if those guys are that upset, he's got to be doing something right.
I think the polling reflects that.
Exactly.
I absolutely think it does. It is shocking to watch, but I think you're absolutely right. I think the lines have been drawn so clearly, the curtain has been pulled back, whatever metaphor you want to use, but it is clear now where the media stands. The only parallel I would say that was similar is, you remember how the media loved John McCain until he was the presidential candidate against Barack Obama, and that tended to change things for him.
It did, and if you remember, McCain, when they turned on him, said something to the effect of, "I thought you guys were my base," and that was true right up until the minute he was the Republican nominee.
It is quite clear the sides have been chosen, and it's good to know, though. I mean, I think this is one of the reasons the media is losing ground with the American public. They just don't pay attention to them anymore.
Well, and I'll tell you, even more worrisome than the old media, the print media and broadcast media, is social media and the tech titans. A couple of weeks ago we had Mark Zuckerberg testifying in the Senate, and I am deeply concerned about the partisan bias, about the extreme left-wing agenda, and the power that Facebook and Twitter and Google have is something William Randolph Hearst and the Yellow Journalist could never have imagined. We need to be very serious dealing with that.
Without question, that is the future. Senator Ted Cruz, as always, great to talk with you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.